Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Iraqi military and Iranian-backed Shiite militias have seized large parts of Tikrit as part of their offensive to retake the city from the self-proclaimed Islamic State. The operation marks Iraq's largest military attempt to roll back the gains made by ISIL last June. Iranian advisors and Iranian-backed Shiite fighters are playing a key role while the U.S. has been sidelined. Colombia is halting air attacks on FARC rebels for 1 month as peace talks between the two sides advance. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos said the pause reflects the rebels' adherence to a unilateral ceasefire declared in December and could be extended if the ceasefire continues to hold.
To boost the de-escalation of the conflict, I have decided to order the Ministry of Defense and the commanders of the armed forces to stop bombings over FARC camps for a month. After that time, we will review the implementation of the unilateral ceasefire, and according to the results, we will decide whether to continue.
Cuban-brokered negotiations in Havana have made progress on several key issues, including land reform, political integration of ex-rebels, the drug trade, and clearing landmines from rural areas. The city manager of Ferguson, Missouri, has resigned in the continued fallout from a federal probe into systemic racial bias. In its report last week, the Justice Department blamed John Shaw for overseeing a municipal system that targets African Americans for arrests and profits off of their fines. Ferguson Mayor James Knowles announced Shaw's departure.
The city and John came to a mutual agreement that we want to be able to move forward as a community. John and the city felt this was an opportunity to do that, start fresh.
As city manager, Shaw was the most powerful local official in Ferguson. His departure comes 1 day after the local municipal court judge, Ronald Brockmeyer, was also forced to resign his post. A court clerk and 2 police supervisors were forced out last week for sending racist emails. Former Secretary of State and presumed Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has spoken out for the first time on the controversy surrounding her personal email account. Clinton used a private account rather than a government one during her State Department tenure, and her aides failed to preserve her emails on government servers in a possible violation of federal law. On Monday, Clinton said using a personal account was a matter of convenience and that staffers have handed over her government-related emails for public use.
When I got to work as Secretary of State, I opted for convenience to use my personal email account, which was allowed by the State Department, because I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of 2. Looking back, it would have been better if I'd simply used a second email account and carried a second phone, but at the time, this didn't seem like an issue. The server will remain private, and I think that the State Department will be able, over time, to release all of the records that were provided.
In fact, a few weeks ago at a business women's summit, Hillary Clinton said that she does use 2 phones, a BlackBerry and an iPhone. The law changed in 2009 around using government email. Colin Powell didn't use it. Hillary Clinton didn't, though her term went beyond 2009. The first person to use the State Department government email as Secretary of State was John Kerry. During her remarks, Clinton also weighed in on the controversy surrounding a Republican letter to Iran aimed at undermining the ongoing nuclear talks. An open letter from 47 Republican senators warned the Iranian government the deal could be nixed by a Republican Congress or future Republican president.
The recent letter from Republican senators was out of step with the best traditions of American leadership, and one has to ask, what was the purpose of this letter? There appear to be 2 logical answers. Either these senators were trying to be helpful to the Iranians or harmful to the commander-in-chief in the midst of high-stakes international diplomacy. Either answer does discredit to the letter's signatories.
According to the website Loblog, the senator who spearheaded the letter, freshman Arkansas Republican Tom Cotton, received nearly $1 million in donations to his election campaign efforts last year from the Emergency Committee for Israel, run by neoconservative pundit Bill Kristol. The Intercept reports Cotton was set to appear at a secretive meeting of weapons contractors one day after sending the letter on Monday. The Obama administration's pulled a measure to limit ammunition and assault rifles and handguns under pressure from the gun lobby. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms and Explosives had called for banning the M855 green tip ammunition and AR-15s because it could be used to pierce through police body armor. But the proposal was withdrawn after a campaign by the National Rifle Association and several Republican members of Congress. A bipartisan group of senators has introduced what's being described as the first comprehensive medical marijuana legislation in the nation's history. The CARES Act from Republican Senators Rand Paul and Democratic Senators Cory Booker and Kristen Gillibrand would end the federal prohibition on medical marijuana and let states set their own rules. Booker and Gillibrand helped unveil the measure.
Today we join together to say enough is enough. Our federal government has long overstepped the boundaries of common sense, fiscal prudence, and compassion with its marijuana laws. These laws must change.
This new bill, the CARES Act, which would recognize that marijuana has accepted medical uses and would recognize the will of voters in 23 states that have decided that denying families access is wrong. The bipartisan bill would finally allow patients and families, including veterans, in those 23 states to access medical care without fear of prosecution.
A coalition of online media, legal, and political advocacy groups has filed suit over the U.S. government's mass surveillance. Organizations including Wikipedia and Human Rights Watch are challenging the NSA's Upstream program, which taps into the fiber optic cables moving Internet traffic around the world. Attorney Patrick Toomey of the American Civil Liberties Union said the spying violates constitutional protections.
The NSA's indiscriminate copying and searching through Americans' international communications imposes a chilling effect on basic freedoms, the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the freedom of inquiry, and it also is an invasion of Americans' right to privacy in those communications. We have long operated in this country on a basic rule that the government does not search your home, your papers, and today your emails when you've done nothing wrong. And the flip side of that rule is that the government must go to a court with individualized suspicion when it wants access to those materials.
The Supreme Court previously rejected an ACLU challenge to warrantless spying on the grounds the plaintiffs could not prove they were targeted. North Carolina's fined the utility giant Duke Energy $25.1 million, the largest environmental fine in state history. The penalty concerns groundwater contamination from a coal ash plant near Wilmington. It's separate from a pending fine at the federal level for Duke's spill of over 35 million gallons of coal ash into the Dan River, one of the worst such spills in U.S. history. Lawmakers in Utah have approved a measure that would reintroduce the firing squad if lethal injections are unavailable for state executions. Utah Governor Gary Herbert says he has not yet decided whether he'll sign the bill into law. And a ceremony was held in Tokyo Tuesday to mark the 70th anniversary of the U.S. bombing of the city. The so-called Operation Meeting House air raid of March 1945 is known as the deadliest in history, killing over 100,000 people and leaving much of Tokyo in flames. Today, Japan is marking the 4th anniversary of the earthquake and tsunami that killed over 18,000 people and set off a nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima plant. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Juan, before we move on with our first segment, you have a very interesting piece in the New York Daily News today. Hedge fund executives give till it hurts to politicians, especially Cuomo, to get more charter schools.
Yes, well, I wrote about it, an interesting symposium that was held at the Harvard Club yesterday. an all-day symposium titled Bonds and Blackboards, Investing in Charter Schools. And it was a meeting basically of hedge fund types sponsored by the Gates Foundation and by the Walton Foundation. Of
Walmart.
Of the Walmart family, basically enticing more investors to begin to see how they can make money off of charter schools. An all-day symposium was a small protest of parents outside, but it really has marked the enormous change that's occurred in New York politics and I think around the country, as a new report showed that hedge fund executives over the last decade have poured nearly $40 million into political contributions just in New York State. The prime beneficiary over the last few years has been Governor Cuomo, who's received almost $5 million. We're talking about Carl Icahn, you know, the famous corporate raider. We're talking about Paul Singer, the Vulture Fund hedge fund guy. We're talking about Julian Robertson of the Tiger of Tiger Management, some of the richest people in New York City. And they're also, most of them, also major backers of charter schools.
How do they make money from charter schools?
Well, that's I think a lot of it now is going to be coming in with the facilities financing that's going to occur. Governor Cuomo pressed the legislature, for instance, in New York State, to begin providing what will be the equivalent of about $2,600 per child to build new facilities for charter schools, forcing Mayor de Blasio in New York City to share some of this cost. So there's going to be a new revenue stream in addition to direct funding from the state for per pupil education. There's now going to be a charter facilities fund that's been set up. And, of course, the governor wants to lift the cap on charter schools to allow many more charter schools to be started in New York. So this, and the amount of money is not just in the direct contributions. It's also in money being given to new groups, the dark money that we've seen after Citizens United case, where folks like Robertson and Dan Loeb contributed as much as $1 million apiece last year to a new group funding ads promoting Republicans for Senate seats who are in New York State, which would assure, again, support for charter schools. And so it's an enormous amount of money that's being poured into these political campaigns, specifically by hedge fund folks who are very close to charter schools. In fact, one charter network alone, the Success Academy, which I've reported on repeatedly, 19 members of the board of directors or their family members gave $600,000 to Governor Cuomo's campaigns for his last two election campaigns. It's an enormous amount of money and it's not getting much attention. And
we'll continue to cover this issue. Of course, we just did an interview with Chuy Garcia last week, who is the mayoral contender against Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, and charter schools are a key issue there as well in the race.
Absolutely.